I agree with you. I think the franchisor, you got to cut your losses, right? You got to look at it and go like, what's the best way out of this? That we've got to move on from this franchisee.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Our guest today is Angela Coté of AC Inc. And I'm really excited about this conversation, Angela, because I don't usually talk about field coaching or field support. And that's what you're all about. But first, before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, tell us about your background. You got started early in franchising. How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't think I had a choice. My dad's the founder of a franchise company in Canada. I was 5 when he started it, and over the years we grew to almost 500 locations across Canada. And so, as you can imagine, being the daughter of a founder, I got to live and breathe in many different roles. Most notably, dressed up as Kelly Kebab at grand openings. Many people know me for that, but all kidding aside, I spent a lot of time in the field supporting franchisees. You can imagine this, 20-year-old, you just invested $400,000, John, in probably your life savings into a franchise. Yeah. And the person that shows up to help you be successful and help you get up and running is this 20-year-old female boss's daughter. So you can imagine I learned a lot in the field, especially because this was typically men that were much older than me at the time. So I learned a lot in those days in the field and franchising. That's where when I've really been able to pick up for what we do now. And it also was a multi-unit franchisee for 18 years of the brand. And in that situation, I was able to live and breathe in the franchisee's shoes and see what worked well in terms of the field support and what was missing. So that's my background for you in a nutshell.
And why not stay with the brand, and why not become a franchisor? So having a father as a franchisor oftentimes results in that.
Yeah, I know that's a really good question, and it's actually kind of a silly reason, a funny reason maybe. In the late 90s, when I was fresh out of college, I went to work for our area developer in Western Canada, and our head office was in Southern Ontario at the time. And when I went out to work in the West, I fell in love with the West. I fell in love with my future, now husband, and really loved the just being out West, doing something different. And then, so when the opportunity came to open stores on Vancouver Island, it's a beautiful place. And I thought, that sounds like a great lifestyle. So I guess I picked that lifestyle at the time over moving back to, the cold winters and the craziness and the hustle and bustle of Ontario. So in the end though, I shouldn't say in the end, but what's been really cool for me has been being able to create my own thing out of the background that I have. So I have zero regrets. It's been an awesome journey. I did sell my stores a few years ago, and my dad sold the company to private equity about 12 years ago, and it's actually flipped since to a publicly traded company.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, okay. Lots going on.
Great. So, Angela, franchisors are your clients. Is that correct? Franchisees aren't paying you, even though you're providing a service to them.
That's correct. Yeah. So the franchisor hires us to basically what they're wanting is they're realizing what we're doing in the field, whatever it is that we're doing isn't getting us the results we want. And so we want to improve franchisee engagement. We want to improve franchisee profitability. Obviously, we also want to improve our ability to attain royalties. So we call it unlocking the hidden profitability in the franchise system, because it's there and it just needs to be unlocked. A lot of franchisors think of growth as number of units and going out getting more franchisees, which is important, of course. But in order to even just do that, you need profitable, happy franchisees. So we focus on that. The franchisor hires us. We have a multitude of different services we can do to maximize that, what's happening in the field.
And your focus is on franchisee profitability.
Yeah. Yeah, which again, if franchisees are happy and profitable, we all know that helps drive company growth. And that does naturally translate to higher revenue, which translates to more royalties for the franchisor, so everybody wins.
Great. So a franchisor is usually jealously guarding their franchisees. They like to be the influencer. They don't like an outsider to be the influencer. they want to be the one who provides the system, the training, the support. So how is it that you are able to become the provider of this service for some franchise companies?
Good one. Yeah. And I love handling objections. So if a franchisor comes to us with that, one of the big things that I think a lot of franchisors can admit to is that franchisees often do resonate differently with a third party. So if we're working directly with the franchisees, and that's not actually our main service, but if we are working directly with franchisees, we have on our team, we're made up of a bunch of former past franchisees and top performing multi-unit franchisees who can speak to how to get there. So that part helps, when the franchisor sees that the franchisees are probably more likely to listen to us and be motivated by what we're telling them. But our main service is working with the field teams to level up. And what I mean by that is working with them on things like leadership skills. They might understand a profit and loss statement, but do they know how to teach a franchisee what that is? Do they know how to teach a franchisee about their leadership so that their retention in their business will be better? So we're working mostly with the people in the field, and the franchisors typically see that as an area that they don't have really the time and energy to put towards it. They're usually more focused on going and getting more franchisees, and usually happy to leave. And often what we do is we bring our systems in, and then they can take those systems on as their system. So they're not dependent on us ongoing. It's just sometimes like more of a setup situation.
Why is it that some franchisors seem to believe that they can provide training for a week or 3, put a franchisee out in the field, and that franchisee ought to be able to follow the system and make money? And doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah. Well, what I hear over and over again and see over and over again is that franchisors, especially founders or the executives on the team, are themselves high performers and high achievers and very driven. And they maybe misinterpret the fact that the reason the franchisee is typically choosing the franchise system or the franchise option over doing their own business is because they need that support and help. And so I think we see over and over again where franchisors are like, I don't understand. I should just tell them what to do. They should just go do it. But I think that there's a gap in what franchisors understand that the franchisees are capable of. Now, the exception would be, a multi-unit franchisee that knows how to build out a leadership team and has the capital to do that. But your everyday, owner operator franchisee, even if they're like 2 or 3 multi-unit, they typically need more guidance. And why wouldn't we want to leverage the collective wisdom of the system rather than letting them just go figure it out after they get trained?
How often do you discover franchisors that really need to go back to work on their system? It's either not a system, or it's a half-baked system, almost there, or there are glitches in the system. They've got everything right, but not the marketing, or they're selecting the wrong franchisees. Again, that should be part of their operating system. How often does that happen, that franchisors are not providing the system that's so essential in franchising?
Yeah, I would say, from what I see, under about 25 units is where we see that the most. So I'd say it's very common in that stage, under about 25 units. They seem to have kind of gotten lucky to get to that point. That's when they come to us and say, okay, we've been in business, we've been franchising for, 3 or 4 years. We've got these 20 or 25 franchisees, and they were happy at first, but now they're starting to question everything we do. They're not successful because, we didn't have everything figured out. And we often see brands at that stage. That's the time when they take that pause. They go, we need to slow everything down. We need to fix the support and improve the support. We need to get more clear on, like you said, the avatar of an ideal franchisee. And I will say, when I first started AC Inc., I grown up in franchising, but I didn't know what it was that people were going to need support with and help with. But people in my network were saying, you must have learned something over the years. You've got to go help people in franchising. And I knew right away that one of the areas that when I reflected on what I learned over the years had definitely to do with the franchisee-franchisor relationship. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go in and find out what people are doing in the field. And if they had, say, 20, 25 franchisees, but then I went and took a good look at it, I would see right away that problem isn't just the way that you're supporting, it's that you're bringing in the wrong franchisees. You got really excited about growing, that classic, just took the check because they needed the franchise fee, and they're feeling those pains. And so we've often had to help them really revamp all of that, and even exit. We'll help people exit franchisees that aren't a fit in as gracious as as possible, because often that happens, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a big ugly mess. We can do that in a way that saves everybody's dignity.
But oftentimes in those cases, franchisees are angry. They've spent a lot of money. They haven't made money. They felt like they've been misled. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't.
Right.
But when you suggest as the franchisor, well, we think you ought to exit the franchise, you should sell your franchise, knowing they don't have anything to sell because they haven't built anything.
Yeah.
The franchisor is not giving the money back. So, what do? They tend to get angry. But at the same time, and in some of these cases, let's see if you agree, it's better for the franchisor to say, we'll pay you to get out.
Yep.
Because an angry franchisee who's not making money, who feels that they have been betrayed by the franchisor, they're not going to validate that franchise. So you as the franchisor are trying to sell franchises. You can't. You've got angry franchisees, and it's going to cost you something. I mean, this was your mistake as well as theirs.
Exactly.
Sometimes franchisees, candidates mislead as well, when it's the franchisor's job to do the due diligence and to make sure they've got the money, they've got the right personality. But this doesn't happen quite often.
I agree with you. I think the franchisor, you got to cut your losses, right? You got to look at it and go, like, what's the best way out of this? That we've got to move on from this franchisee. And what we'll do is, if they're open to this, is we can talk to a franchisee as a third party that maybe helps them see it a little different as well. We've done this and had franchisees that might be complaining about things, and sometimes the franchisee might be more of a fit than we think if we go in and understand them a little better and give them the proper coaching and support. So sometimes they can turn around. But the other thing is, sometimes it's just like, you were both new at this. You came into the system at an early stage. You came in knowing it was new, so you should probably recognize that this, this challenge was a possibility, and it's maybe not working. But let's look at what could you be doing in life that you'd be happier. Maybe it's just, it's not a good situation, but there's a way to move on. Let's just see if we can help you cut your losses, and everybody will be happier at the end of the day.
How often have you had to say to a franchisor, you're not ready for us to come and help you? You want field support, you want to hire field support people, but that's not the problem. The problem is what can be, and how often does that happen?
Well, I would argue that a franchisor, because we can either we can help them hire their first field person, their field coach, or we help them with if they're brand new as a franchisor, how do you support the franchisees? And I would argue that it's always best if the sooner you get that in place, the better, because it's hard to go in when you have 10 franchisees that have been there for a couple of years and say, oh, now we're going to start actually supporting you and coaching you. And they're like, well, I don't need you. And by then there might even be tension. So in a perfect world, I would argue that you're not really ever too early to get your proper coaching and support set up. But what we've uncovered, or just discovered, is that when a franchisor under about 20 units, they don't have the capital often, and the wisdom to know how valuable it would be to set it up early on. So they just put it off until, so it's like that kind of, okay, you've got 3 franchisees and you've heard that you should support them properly. We can come in and help you. It's going to cost you money. You're going to have to invest in this. It's going to be a good investment. Or you can come back to me and when you've got your 20 franchisees in a big mess, and you can probably pay a little more then, which is usually what happens. And you know what? I've kind of gotten to the point where I accept that. I'm like, if I can't get through to you and you want to just try to figure this out yourself, that's fine. Like everyone thinks they can figure it out themselves. And then we see them at the like 20, 25, 30. We've seen, actually, we work with brands that have 100 franchisees and still really don't have designated field support in place. Like, oh, they call the marketing person for that. They call this person for this question, but it's very hotline and reactive and firefighting type support. So it's interesting when you look at the different brands, different stages people are at, and this is really the progressive way of coaching franchisees that we're trying to help people understand the value of.
So a couple of themes are emerging here already. One is, if you are going to buy a franchise and they have fewer than 25 franchisees in their system, you should be aware of the possibility they don't have an operating system, or they don't have a well thought out operating system. Valid? True?
Yeah, and that's okay if you're okay with that, right? If you're an early adopter type franchisee that wants to grab the market and loves the brand and you're a little bit more entrepreneurial, you might be okay with that.
But you've got to be an early adapter. You have to have the personality for that.
Yeah.
And you can't be thinking, everything's going to go really great here. I'm going to invest. It's going to take me 8 months, 18 months. I'm going to start making money, more money than I've made before. I'm going to own my own business. I'm going to really feel good about this. No, it didn't work that way, because they only had 12 franchises, 6 franchises. You got in early. You got in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
Many people kicked themselves for years that they didn't get in on the ground floor of McDonald's, other big brands. But maybe it won't work out as well for you, because oftentimes it doesn't. Not all of these emerging franchise companies, as we know, make it. So you get in early, under 25 franchises, and the franchisor, one point you mentioned, they don't always have the capital. They don't have the money to invest in the field support. And sometimes they don't think field support is all that important. We got the training.
Yeah, more franchisees is more important in the early stage, it seems, to that.
So buyers have to be careful. Emerging franchises, we love them for all kinds of reasons. The creativity, the excitement of bringing these new franchises online and giving opportunities to people. But there's no assurance of a guarantee, not even when they've got 100 or more units, is there assurance of guarantee. But there's a greater risk at these lower levels. So people have to be cautious of that. They also need to be cautious that, and maybe ask the question, do you provide field support? After I get trained and I'm out in the field by myself, I know I can pick up a phone and call somebody, but do you have someone who comes and visits me, works with me, guides me, holds my hand?
Yeah.
That would be another question, I think, that buyers need to be aware of.
I would ask the question, as a franchisee, are you going to find out my goals? Do you, as a franchisee, I want you to ask me, what's my longer term plan here? And then I want you to help me with the steps to get there. And I want you to check in regularly with me. And I want you to hold me accountable, because I'm motivated to hit my goals, not because you told me I have to hit them. Right? And so we identify support as operational, which is a little bit more like what you should expect. And that's like, oh, they've got a good learning management system for ongoing training that you can access, and good marketing tools and things, and they can call us when they need us. We call that operational, which is, it's more kind of reactive, or what you should expect. But are they looking at, where you're trying to get to, and then working with you to get there? One other thing I've seen, though, just in talking about emerging brands, is, especially emerging brands, is over supporting. It's sort of a new thing we're talking about at AC Inc. And what I mean by that is there's no boundaries, and the franchisor is so worried about getting the franchisee successful that they start to do things for the franchisee. I think a little bit of that is okay, but you can start to create a monster, because now the franchisees don't know how to do what they need to do, right? It's like your teenager. If you just never expected your teenager to ever pick up their clothes on the floor or do their own laundry or their dishes, then they're never going to learn it and they're going to always be dependent on you. So that's a third type of support you want to check, because that sounds great for the franchisee in the moment. Are you going to, you're going to do that kind of support? Because that happens in the early stages, often with the first few franchisees, because the franchisor wants to make sure they get it right? So, yeah.
So another theme that's emerging, we've talked about selecting the right person to be a franchisee, and you as a franchise candidate selecting the right franchisor, because they're not all created equal. So do you find franchisors more often, less often, or no change in this, using any kind of a personality assessment? I'm a huge fan of DISC. There are many more sophisticated assessments and more costly assessments. Mostly they're built on DISC, since that's been around since the 1950s. I like DISC a lot. I've worked with it for 30 some years. And as a franchisor, I use DISC to determine the compatibility of a franchise prospect, and knowing what the business required of people. If they didn't have that as a strength, why bring them on as a franchisee? But not every franchisor believes in assessments or profiling, or they don't know about them, or they don't use them for whatever reason. What do you see there? What's happening?
Great question. Yeah. In our network of our community of franchisors, I would agree with you that there's mixed feelings on it. One of the biggest takeaways I continuously hear from franchisors is that you always use an assessment tool as a conversation piece, but not like a be-all end-all decision maker, right? Like if you identify something in an assessment that looks a certain way, you might want to dig deeper into it before you decide that, oh, this candidate's not a fit, or that like maybe it's just something to have a conversation about. Like if, for example, a lot of franchise companies require the franchisee to go out and drum up business, whether that's, community marketing or whatever it is. They have to be comfortable, in basically like a salesperson role. Now, if the franchisee is really uncomfortable with that, but they check all the other boxes, then is there a workaround where you could have somebody else that they hire in their company to do that, right? So I think the assessments are great for getting the picture and then having conversations. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that, because when a franchisee, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know oftentimes that it's important to look at the personality, the requirements of the franchise system. And very simply, as we're talking, if the franchise system requires you to go out and drum up business, that's called being a salesperson.
Yeah.
And if you hate being a salesperson, and even the thought of it, or you can't do sales because whatever reason, you just don't want to, you can't, don't see yourself as a salesperson, this is a problem, because how are you going to make money? How are you going to bring in revenue if you can't sell? The answer there is, you still want to buy the franchise, you've got to bring somebody into the business who can sell, who you trust, and who will do that.
And has the same passion, right, for the brand that you do. Like you can't, that's the thing. I think people think, oh, I can hire someone, but you've got to find, I believe, find somebody who has the same passion and excitement and skill set to do it. Because I think, often you're thinking that you're going to have more capital than you do. But if the person is really bought in and, maybe they'll be willing to take a smaller salary early on to help you build.
You bring them in as a partner. You give them a percentage of the business and reward them that way. It certainly is better to give up 10 to 20% of your ownership than to fail or to struggle. If the secret formula included a partner or a really top employee who got paid really well, based on commission, however the structure's developed, that's much better giving up some money than losing the franchise or being frustrated by it. But again, franchisors don't do a good job of finding franchise candidates or who are compatible. We've both seen where, particularly when they're in the emerging under 25, under 50 franchisees, they need that franchisee investor's money to meet the payroll.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, but that's part of what does happen.
Yeah.
And they don't, along with this, because they don't know, franchisee candidates don't know, check out the personality of the franchise, and franchisors either don't know or don't want to check on the compatibility of the franchise candidate with the system, the operating system. This needs to be addressed in franchising. The same as there's no law that says a franchisor has to prove that the system works. And yet if the system doesn't work, and I always look to the system as the secret sauce in franchising. I think maybe there's more than one secret sauce, or there are different kinds. There's Alfredo sauce, there's Bolognese sauce, there's the secret sauce that if they don't have that, there's no chance of success on the franchisee's part. And I think it's a lack of money in some cases. It's a lack of knowing, well, you have to provide the system. Successful businesses, franchised or not, work off successful systems. No system, no success. So what do you do in those cases? And maybe you check this out before you agree to take a franchisor on as a client. Do you check out the system to make sure that there aren't so many holes in it that you won't be able to succeed with them?
Absolutely, yeah. So if we're going to go work with a client, whether that's working directly with the franchisees or helping them get their field support sorted or coaching their field teams, if we see other issues, we would address that right away, because we don't want to have a failure on our hands either, right? Like we've learned that too the hard way, that we think, okay, well, we'll just stay in our lane, but it doesn't. It frankly doesn't work, and we don't want to be attached to that anyway. So what we is one of the things that within our services is working with the franchisor leadership team to get their coaching and their operations in order. And so that's where we would take a step back and say, like, are you open to us helping you see some things that we can see on the outside? And if they're like, no, we just want you to do this, then we'll, that's not a fit then.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good for anybody in franchising.
Well,
and again, franchisors, let's say they have a really good system. The operating system actually has been proven. It does work. But then there are franchisors who believe, well, we provide outstanding training to our franchisees. It's a 10-day training program. We provide manuals. We provide videos. We do all kinds of things online to train them. We train them really well. We send them home. What that franchisor sometimes doesn't realize is that over the weekend, the franchisee forgot everything they learned.
Or didn't even store it in the first place because it was so much.
People learn in different ways. Franchisors don't always understand that. Some are auditory when they learn. Some are kinesthetic when they learn. Depending on how well the franchisor did the training, delivered the training, may mean how well the franchisee retains what to do. So then they're shocked. Well, we taught them what to do. How can they be calling and saying they don't know what to do? And there's nobody joining them for a grand opening, or no one saying, I'm going to meet you. You get set up, and then I'll come in 3 days after you've opened, and I'll hold your hand and take you through the steps. Do franchisors not realize the importance of that?
You know what I think it is I think that people, there's two parts to it. In my mind, there's training a franchisee and then ongoing coaching or training. Like, to me, training is, I'm going to teach you the information, and then coaching is if you were going to learn how to play soccer and you've never played soccer, I could train you, but then you're going to go play, right? And you need to, what happens when this happens? Or I thought I knew how to do this proper kick, but I actually need you to get in there with me and help me because I'm not doing it right. So I think that's a really important, that ongoing coaching piece where it's back and forth. That's the part that I think gets missed.
In the mid-1990s, many years ago, I wrote a book called You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. This was for David Sandler Sales Associates, Sandler Training. Sandler was a terrific guy, a great salesperson. And at the time, I was writing books with many different franchise people. I wrote Fred DeLuca's book, co-founder of Subway, on 15 lessons from the co-founder of Subway. It was called Start Small, Finish Big. So I was doing a lot of these books. And I was always struck by David Sandler, who had the wisdom of knowing you can't train somebody at a seminar and expect them to get on the bike and ride it successfully. They're going to fall off.
Yeah.
And the field coach or the mentor needs to be there to pick them up, brush them off, give them some tips, help them.
Pep talk. Maybe a little mental pep talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And franchisors often miss that point, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Does field support have to be in the field, or can it be the coach is on the phone at home providing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We use the term field, meaning the liaison between the home office and the franchisees. So it definitely can be like Zoom calls. Ideally, Zoom over phone as much as you can, so that you're, more like you're in person. One other thing, we talked a little bit about like operational versus proactive coaching. One other thing that this plays into this too is that the field coach should be working on helping the franchisee work on their business and not just in it. And so that work is typically, you don't need to be there with them. You're working with them on what steps are you going to take going out into your community to drum up business. You're working on retention. Now, obviously, we got to be careful with joint employer threats, but when it comes to retention, that requires being a good leader. Let's talk about how you can develop yourself as a leader. That doesn't need to be in the, like, quote unquote, actually out in the field. So what I would say field coaching looks like is typically in the first year, it might be weekly or eventually bi-weekly, Zoom calls where you're going back to that roadmap of where they're trying to get to and then holding accountable, checking in on how things are going with that. And then ultimately maybe going to monthly. But we also encourage franchisors to incorporate peer-to-peer peer groups and peer-to-peer coaching and mentoring as well to help with the resources, just because it might not be practical for them to have weekly calls with every franchisee, in the system.
Exactly. So once again, looking on my background, when I was the CEO of We Buy Ugly Houses, one of the things that I instituted was the Homevestors Mastermind. And we would put 7-8 franchisees from different parts of the country into this mastermind. And it was very intensive. It was 2.5 days. So the host franchisee, and you had to be a franchisee for a period of time to qualify to get into this kind of a program. Because when you're the host, you're going to essentially reveal your business plan.
Yeah, open up everything, right?
To your guests, who are also franchisees, who are maybe a little more successful than you, maybe a little less successful than you, but all doing the same type of thing, faced with the same challenges. And then those guests are able to look at your business plan, ask you questions, ask your employees questions, and essentially they undress the host in a period of a day, and they figure out where all the blemishes are, and they tell you, you're not doing this, and you're not doing this, and you're not doing this. You may be one of the top 10 franchisees, but you're leaving money on the table for these reasons. That became the most valuable field support that we could provide to our, at the time when I left, about 265 franchisees.
Yeah, that's so true. They're so much more motivated by their peers. And I remember when I was a franchisee, I just flashed back to this recently, that when I was struggling with getting my team, my staff, to do what I needed them to do, or struggling with retention, and at the time we called them field consultants. I'm sure you'll remember that term. My field support person. They might have given me tips, but it was really when I talked to other franchisees. So I asked who is one of the best at retention and like staffing, and I talked to that franchisee. She had 5 locations. She was very out of the business, able to just have them run. It's like, how'd you get there? And so she became a mentor for me. And that was where I got the best, support. Like, you just naturally believe the other franchisees more because they're in there doing it at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What that leads to one of my final questions as we start to run out of time. The field coach who's never been a franchisee. So what happens when the 20-year-old shows up or the 25-year-old shows up, say, I'm here to help you make profit. I understand you're struggling.
Yeah.
And, this is not someone who has franchisee experience. What happens in that scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few things going through my mind to mention here. One is, so we at AC Inc., we run a virtual roundtable for field coaches. And this topic comes up a lot. How do you build credibility when you haven't been a franchisee, or if you're young, or if your franchisees are all sort of like rough and tumble, more mechanic type guys? How do you get them to listen to you? So we teach these things, but I'll give you a few hot tips on this. We encourage the person in the field, and this is what I did, and I learned this through trial and error. But for one thing, just admitting what you don't know really helps. Like saying, hey, Mr. Franchisee, like I'm here to do what I can to bring what the home office team wants you to know and do my best and share what other franchisees are doing. But I need you to share with me, like, what do you need help with? What can I go find out for you? But being a little bit vulnerable helped a lot. Surprisingly, it sounds almost backwards. And as a franchisee, I saw the field people come in, probably because I was the founder's daughter. They were probably nervous and they came in very authoritative, but that's the wrong approach. Like coming in and admitting, I need to know how I can help you. A couple other tips we've heard are to see if they have a strategic plan. Like I might not have owned the business like you do, but having another set of eyes, like, what is your plan? And then often they're like, I don't actually have a plan, and saying, okay, well, I can share with you what some other franchisees are doing, just trying to bring in other things from the network. And then the third point I was just going to make is that when it comes to finding the right person for the field, we believe at AC Inc. that there's sort of three things to think about. One is understanding the brand. They don't have to have worked in it, but really just understanding and like having passion for the brand. Number two is having business skills. Like this is kind of what you need to think about for field people. And number three is the coaching skills and or soft skills. So I believe you can coach them on one or two of those areas, but they need to eventually have focused on those three areas. So by them having that coaching development and training, they'll be better able to get credibility with the franchisees because of that. So that's how we solve that.
Another important question there for a franchise prospect to ask the franchisor is, how many field coaches do you have? Will I be assigned, multiple questions here, will I be assigned the same field coach for a year or more so that I don't have to change people all the time? Will they come to me in person, or is it only online that I'm going to get that kind of support? Because that doesn't give you the kinesthetic quality in training that some people need to have. They actually need you to hold their hand and show them how to do it.
Especially certain brands.
They don't provide that. So, and then how are you, when you do a franchise field support roundtable, and let's say you have 10 people virtually on this roundtable, are those field support people from 10 different franchise brands? They're not all they don't work for you specifically.
Correct. Yeah, so these are people that come together from all different brands, big brands, small brands. Probably some people that Wild Birds Unlimited, Paul Pickett's gang are there. Pete Baldine's from Moran Family of Brands, one of his coaches comes to this. And so they're learning best practices from each other and from us, because we've been able to look at, what different brands are doing. And so we have a different topic every week, and we talk about things like, well, one big one was, how do you deal with high performers or legacy franchisees that don't think they need help? And by the end of it, one of our field coaches one of the field coaches there said, okay, I'm going to go try this. A couple weeks later, she reported that she finally broke through with this older franchisee that had been around a long time, and he's now calling her, and they started to build a relationship. So sometimes just that, it's just like franchisees like peer-to-peer learning. The people in the field are getting a lot out of that peer-to-peer learning. Yeah, that's great. Will you hire field support people for a young franchisor that says, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have the money, the time? Yeah.
and do that hiring?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of case studies that we've done on that. We do, that is a service that we offer. So we coach and guide them. So ultimately they're making the hiring decision, but we help them with what's the DNA of a high performing field coach. Where do you find them? One of the biggest mistakes people make is that they think they have to find them in franchising, but just because somebody worked at a franchise company doesn't mean they did proper field coaching at that company. So it's really looking at, for again, those three things I said before about like understanding the brand, business skills, and coaching. And so we look for those as much as we can, and that we coach them up on the missing pieces.
And what does it cost a franchisor to have one field support person, whether on the phone at corporate office or out in the field? Of course, if they're out in the field, they're limited as to how many people they could help in a day. So what does field support cost franchise?
If it's in-house, if you're a franchisor and you have a person on your team that does field support, we're seeing it in the range of we're gonna go kind of a bigger range, $60,000 to $100,000 a year salary. That's around what we see. But I believe that as I think I said earlier, franchisors, one of the biggest pain points we hear is my franchisees aren't profitable. They're upset. They're not engaged. I'm not making any royalties because they're not doing well. So if they're trying to fix that problem, who's responsible for that? The person in the field. So I think we need to level up and think about that role as a more important role. So I think 60 is too low. I think the talent you're going to get at 60, or you might get the right talent, but then they're going to need that coaching and development.
Yes. So, well, this has been really interesting, Angela. I'm happy that we've had this conversation. It's an unusual one. We don't usually we don't think about field support that much. No one does.
Well, I'm glad I'm bringing it to your attention then.
Yeah, exactly, because this needs to be taught more, including at the Titus Center with my students. And you're a great resource for my students to be able to reach out to, because those who are going to look for field support opportunities have a great deal to learn from you. You might have internships available at AC Inc. that my students may be interested in filling at some point. So I'm really happy we had the discussion, and happy that we agree that not everything is perfect in franchising. There are things we need to spend more time on. We need to give more attention to some, not just big issues that are obviously out there for people. Does the system work or not? Are you being fair in the way you're treating franchisees? It's also this day-to-day support that is so essential. We emphasize the system a lot, but part of that system has to be the support that a franchisee gets in order to make profit and to sustain profit.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say is I have some data on franchisees that are getting this proper proactive coaching being up 25% in revenue from about 9 months after it started. And I also know of a brand, I won't quote it right now, but who, when they started implementing proactive growth coaching, they made it optional. Franchisees that about 30% of their franchisees took them up on it and were accountable to it, and still are. And those franchisees are growing 30% more revenue year over year. So we need to focus on this. At the end of the day, it's all about shareholder value for the company, whether it's a franchisor, owner, or a private equity firm. We all want more out of our franchisees. So that's also an important point.
So what was that first? The 25% was what?
Yeah. That's the 25% is an example of us going in, and now we implemented it. So it's more like we're being the third party, and it's performance group coaching. So it's group coaching, small group of franchisees. We've been working with a brand, and they've hired us to continue with more franchisees because of the results. So the franchisees are up 25% in the original pilot groups, because we worked through the business skills training with them. We helped them get their goals set. We helped them work on accountability to their goals. And these franchisees are loving it. Now they're in the graduate program, which you can resonate well with in the education world, academia, but we call them the graduates now, and they get less calls now because they don't need as much, but their sales are up 25%.
Well, that's wonderful. And it just goes to emphasize the importance of, not only do franchisees need a good system, franchisees need training initially for sure, And then franchisees need that follow-up support that can come from the field support, the field mentor, the coach, whatever business coach, whatever a franchisor decides to call them. Franchisees need that additional help to become successful in their business.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So I'm so glad we got to have this conversation, and really now you know a little bit more about what we do, and I'm learning more about you. So thank you for this.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, Angela. Thank you, and good luck to you at AC Inc. I hope to see more of you in the future.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. And yes, I hope to see more of you as well.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.